Alright, wir machen die Zahlen und ich brauche meinen Pointer. Okay, nein, nicht die Zahlen, wir machen die Farben. Wir machen die Farben. Das sind die Farben. Rot, grün, gelb, violett, blau, orange, rosa, hellgrün, schwarz, weiß, braun, grau. Das alle sind die Farben. Okay? So I'm going to go through them. I'll say them. And please listen. Let me do class dojo points auf meinem Handy, on my cell phone, auf meinem Handy. Did I talk with you already about what cell phone is called in German? Okay, good. All right. So can somebody tell me if I say there's 4 modes of communication? All right. So there's more than 4 modes of communication, but there's 4 main modes of communication when we're talking about learning language. All right. So 4 ways that we communicate when we're learning language. Can you name one, Makai?
Listening.
Listening, very good. Dankeschön. Listening. Also ich gebe Makai ein Klassen-Euro auf Class Dojo. Can anyone else name another one? Listening. Jadalyn. Yeah, saying it. Exactly. What's another way we can say, what's a synonym to saying it? Talking or?
Replying.
What's that? Say again.
Replying.
Replying, they're all exactly the mode of communication, but there's something else that we call it specifically when we're talking about it in linguistics.
Speaking.
Thank you, speaking, very good. Also, ich gebe Makai ein Klassen-Euro und ich gebe Jadalyn ein Klassen-Euro. Alright, so we have listening and speaking. There's 2 more. What else? Jake.
Repeating.
That is a strategy for learning language. That's a strategy for sure, absolutely. Und ich gebe Jake ein Klassen-Euro. Ethan.
How their mouth moves.
That's a way that we perceive language. And so I think maybe we talked about that. One of the issues we're having during COVID is you can't see lips moving. And one way we communicate when we speak is that we also watch someone's lips move when we're what? When we're what? That's another one. Makai?
Reading.
Reading, very good. So when we're listening, we already said that one. So we have speaking, listening. I'm going to put speaking above listening. And we have reading. And Jadalyn, what's the last one?
Writing.
Writing, very good. So these are the 4 modes of communication that we talk about when we're speaking of learning language. Now, if I told you that there is input and output, or receptive skills and productive skills, all right, so receptive, that prefix REC is also in receive. So receptive means we're receiving. Productive means you have the PRO prefix, we're producing. Okay, so productive, receptive. Which 2 do you think are receptive and which 2 do you think are productive? Okay.
Speaking and listening are receiving.
Not quite. And I didn't say no because you're not totally wrong. You're not totally right.
Productive.
Hang on. Sorry, what?
Productive.
That's not what's wrong with the statement you made. Jadalyn.
Writing, speaking, and not listening, and reading are you giving, I guess, and then listening is receiving.
I'll give you one. Listening is receptive. Again, there's one thing wrong with what you said. So we have receptive is listening. There's one more receptive, and then there's 2 productive. Angel.
Reading, receptive.
Very good. Okay. And then the other two are producing. So we're producing productive. All right. So which skill do you think you're going to use most when you start to learn a language? Makai.
Receptive or listening?
Receptive. Yeah, definitely. Receptive is what you're going to do. Why? Why are you going to use receptive when you start learning a language versus productive? Sure, Makai.
Because like when you listen to it first, you'll start to figure out how to say it with your mouth.
Yeah. Are you going to speak are you going to speak when you learn a language first, or are you going to listen and learn the language first? You're going to listen, just like you said. So we learn language first through listening and also reading. So when we're a baby, 1, 2 years old, our parents are reading to us. They might be showing us a picture book. We can see a page. We can see these lines, squiggly lines on the page, and we can see pictures that we might recognize on the page from actual real life, or from cartoons we may see on TV. And we can't read, right? You can't read. But we're hearing words from our parents, from whoever's raising us, and then eventually we construct meaning from those words. So we figure out what some of the words mean. And eventually we're going to produce some of those words, which is when you get a baby's first words, right? But we understand a lot of those words before we say our first word. So those listening skills, we're learning words, we're hearing them, we're understanding what they mean, comes before the production. All right, so before the production phase. And then after that, after the listening, right, comes reading. So we learn to read way after we learn to listen and speak. That's our first language. That's when we're babies, we're 2, 3 years old. We learn to read later, right? Maybe 3, 4 years old, 5 years old. However, when you're learning your second language, you're listening, but you're also reading. You're also reading. We're combining listening and reading together when we learn the second language. Why do you think that we can combine listening and reading when we're learning a second language, but reading doesn't come till much later after listening and speaking in our first language? And it's okay if you don't know. This is just something to think about. But if you have an idea, in our first language, we learn listening, and then we learn to speak to produce that language we hear. But when we're learning a second language, we're using receptive skills, and we combine listening and reading together. Why can we do that in our second language, but we can't do that in our first language, Makai?
Because in our first language, we were learning that because we didn't really have no language, if you know what I mean. And then once we learned that, we were able to read, and we can kind of relate to what your main language is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a perfect explanation. I like the way you said relate, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're taking what you did when you were younger. We're taking our first language. We're taking our skills from our first language, our reading, writing, listening, speaking, everything we've learned up to now. You have a system of language that's going on up here. All right? And so now that first language, that system that's up here in our brains, we're going to add to that a second system. Some people, it might be your third system if you're bilingual already. Some of you might be trilingual. It could be your fourth language system. But you're adding on top of that. And so you're relating what you already know from the first language, to the second language. So since I know how to read in the first language, and we have even an advantage because in German we use the same alphabet. The alphabet is, what alphabet do we use in English and German? Do we know what this is called? Makai?
The Arabic alphabet.
You're thinking of the number system that we learned about, the Arabic numerals, Arabic number system. So, but good memory. Jalen, what alphabet are we using?
The Roman ones?
Ah, that's also a number system that you're thinking of. But you're closer because the Romans are the ones that came up with the alphabet that we use. The Romans who lived in the area of Italy and spoke a language that some would call a dead language today because it's not spoken anywhere. But you're correct, the Romans spoke this language, so very good.
Wow.
Yes, awesome. Latin. So we use the Latin alphabet. The Germans use the Latin alphabet. So we can read the Latin alphabet. So we already know these letters. We don't even have to learn new characters. All we have to do is learn how these characters and the combinations that we see them are pronounced. All right, and then what they mean. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit easier learning this second language than it will be our first language. Furthermore, we did learn that the German language comes from where? I said it wrong. The English language comes from where?
Oh.
From Germany, yes. So we also have an advantage as speakers of English because we speak a Western Germanic language. So it's going to be easier for us to learn German than it would be for speakers of other types of languages, such as Mandarin Chinese or Latin language, Romance languages, which would be Italian, French, Romanian, Spanish. We're going to have a little bit of an advantage as English speakers because some of the words are going to look the same and the sentence structures are going to be the same. All right, so all that to say, we're going to practice listening skills, so please listen. And then I'll say them the second time and I'll ask you to repeat them, so we'll practice the production, we'll produce the language, okay? All right, so listen please only. Die Farben haben wir, die Farben. Rot, rot, grün, grün, gelb, gelb, violett, violett, blau, blau, orange, orange, rosa, rosa, hellgrün, hellgrün, schwarz, schwarz, weiß, weiß, braun, braun, grau, grau. And then there's one I don't have up here, but I'll write it. I'll say it, and we'll go over what it means after we say them. So, dunkel. All right, so dunkel is similar to hell, the prefix hell. All right, so think about that. We won't talk about it yet, but we have grün, we have hellgrün, and hell is a prefix, and dunkel is the opposite of hell. All right, so think about what that means.